2NURFM 103.7. It is that every second Wednesday we take a look at some of the things happening in the world of education. Of course, we do that with our Professor of Education, John Fischetti, from the University of Newcastle, who, again, smiling away, looking $1 million, mate. You must have some meetings on today or something.
Oh, just a few, Mark. Good morning.
Just a couple. All right. Now, today we want to have a look at, I guess, some new ways potentially of looking at tackling the problem of student behaviour or student bad behaviour, I guess in terms particularly of suspensions, things like that. Where's the conversation at with this today?
So this might be one of those waves of education reform that rotates and comes back. You might have remembered this from a decade or more ago, but there was a Disability Royal Commission just a couple of years ago that issues its recommendations that, in fact, all across Australia, particularly in New South Wales, we might be suspending too many percentage of kids who actually have disabilities. We already knew that we were doing that for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander kids. And the New South Wales government schools have taken a fresh look at this, and they have some new recommendations and some new sort of quota levels for schools.
So does this go sort of beyond necessarily just getting rid of the bad kids out of school for a couple of days and moving into those other areas?
So there are a number of reasons why a child might be suspended or expelled. At the upper end, they could be committing a crime. They might have brought a weapon to school. They could be promoting violence. Those are zero tolerance, and they have a fixed number of days or weeks or termination from the schooling sector. It's more subtle ones that get tricky because as our society has gotten more complex socioeconomically, many kids are bringing anger to school, their own issues, including an increasing number of kids in K2, in kindergarten, coming ready to get angry at their neighbor, their mate, or their teacher.
Yeah, is that a newer phenomenon, John? Or is it just something that's getting more heightened, or are we just becoming more aware of some of those background anger issues that are brought in?
You may be right that we're just becoming more aware, but the socioeconomic divide in New South Wales has increased. The number of kids coming from low socioeconomic background or families feeling really challenged, and this is un-COVID related, right, for a change, means that they're bringing maybe the fact they've never been to the dentist, never been to the eye doctor, maybe have moved 5 times because they keep getting evicted, or their parents might have drug or alcohol issues and the kids are wearing that. The domestic violence issues that have increased all around. The kids wear those things from their families. Then they come to school and are asked to sit around and be quiet and raise their hand when they're asked. So some of it's a misconnect between the way the pedagogies are used and some of it are the way kids are being brought up in certain aspects and in certain families.
All right, so if we take out the really top end, the hot stuff with the violence and weapons, etc. I mean, that, like I said, that's zero tolerance. But all of those other cases that fall below that, is it a case, John, of we need to just completely overhaul how we look at this, or is it sometimes case by case, like students coming from X type of background or whatever might be looked at differently, we could factoring in all the other things?
Right. So what we're trying to do is get suspensions down and where possible to handle things in the classroom and in the school. So the government schools have said we're not going to have more than 10-day suspensions unless it's one of those big items I talked about earlier. And it's then up to the school to manage those. And remarkably, many schools have done so beautifully with this. They create a loving and caring and accepting environment, so that minimizes it. They've got their teachers to be able to read the tea leaves of how kids are behaving, and they have support systems they're providing. But those are some new training that teachers are going to need, particularly with younger kids, where we haven't been used to having that level of anger and potential violence. You would suspect that starts year 5, 6, or above, but now it's trickled all the way down to the youngest.
So what is the answer, John? Because I get that you've got kids that are playing up or being naughty, whatever it is, and yes, you take them out and that can sort of diffuse for everybody else, but then you've got these other kids who we still need to provide the best educational opportunity. So sending you home, it's pack your bags and get home for a couple of days is not the answer either. So what is?
So if you know Maslow's hierarchy of needs from back in your school days, it talks about what we basically respond to. Are we hungry? Are we cold? Are we frightened? Do we have a house? Are we loved? If kids come without those basics, then it's hard to say we're going to learn math today. So we need to prepare teachers for the reality that many of their children will be challenged in those areas. But we can't expect them to fix it because they're really just a teacher. So the schools that are doing really well have done professional learning on anger management, on how to utilize support, including anger management training, providing social work in the school, making sure families have connections to get their needs met. So connecting a mom with TAFE so she might get back to school. Because once a family's heading in the right direction, all of a sudden kids can flip around and be just lovely. We also have to check at the door how we work with kids on the high spectrum of autism and not make assumptions that their mannerisms are threatening. They're really just being the best versions of themselves. So there's a lot of training for teachers. But in the US, the worry I have in the past when this has been done, schools were told, cut your suspensions, which they did, but they moved those kids to a special wing and a special corridor in the school and basically segregated them. We want to do this where those kids have what we call the least restrictive environment. They're able to be in the classroom. So we have no tolerance for violence or bringing a weapon, but we have to have some flexibility to adjust to kids as they are. But we have to provide those resources to teachers. We can't just say teach harder. We're going to have to give them the support because some of these are very complex mental health issues. And the final one I'll mention, Mark, is we have a lot of kids now that have unfettered access to the internet on weekends and at home. A lot of those are wealthy kids who the parents go away and the kids are just on their iPad. Some of the images they're getting, the decapitations, the rapes, the tortures, the mutilations, and that might be just one episode on a streaming service, is rewiring who kids are. And that is actual serious mental health specialists have to be intervened on that to be able to get that right, because a teacher's just there to teach the subject. They're not going to be able to know how to reprogram a kid's brain to think that's not normal.
Yeah, that's the tough one because the poor old teacher always in the middle. I'm here to teach maths or science or reading or writing or numbers. I'm not the mental health professional, but again, if the schools don't have a lot of other stuff happening in the background, it makes it tough on them. John Fischetti, Professor of Education, always a pleasure, mate. We'll catch you in a fortnight.
Thanks, Mark.
2NURFM, a broadcast service of the University of Newcastle.